Joining me today are two distinguished experts. Hey, Eytan Cohen, who is expert in Turkey's foreign affairs and now who is based in Tel Aviv University. And our Owen Obay Shahbandar joining us from Washington, D.C., United States of America. Warm welcome to our show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Cohen, let's start with you. This $53 billion plan for Gaza's reconstruction, which was proposed in Cairo, is clearly ambitious. But let's start with the big picture. Given that Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are backing this plan, what does that tell us about the shifting dynamics in the region, especially when we consider the Abraham Accords and Israel's involvement?
Okay. As we all know, October the 7th created a very important earthquake in the region. If Hamas's attack did not happen, we could all speak about a Middle Eastern peace that we could reach between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, Hamas's brutal attack against Israel, unfortunately, put an end to this peaceful wins in the Middle East, and we found ourselves in a war that we did not prevent. Long story short, today we are seeing what is happening in the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip and the Palestinian people are taken hostage by the Hamas terrorist organization, and these states you mentioned, they are trying to provide here a very creative solution find a way out, because at the end we all witnessed what Donald Trump already said. So especially Jordan and Egypt, they cannot digest such a solution that Donald Trump initiated, and therefore in order to show their seriousness in this matter, they prepared a very detailed plan. But let me tell you, from the Israeli perspective, we have no intention of going back to the October the 6th days. So this particular situation in Gaza, the Hamas rule in Gaza, will be over. And unfortunately, since our kidnapped brothers and sisters are still held in the dungeons of Gaza, we cannot speak about the end of this war.
Very interesting perspectives. Ubay, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have all had a seat at the table with Israel through the Abaraham Accords. Yet here we see them aligning with Egypt on a plan for Gaza that could directly challenge Israel's actions in the region. How do you interpret this apparent contradiction? Could these countries, which have normalized relations with Israel, now find themselves in a position where they are creating a counterweight to its influence?
Well, let's rewind the clock a little bit just to give our viewers some context. In the first Trump administration, President Trump negotiated historic peace accords between a number of Gulf Arab states and the state of Israel, where not only were relations established officially between the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and other countries with the state of Israel, but trade relations, economic relations, including overflights of Israeli planes flying over the airspace of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia into the Arabian Gulf were established. So it went beyond normalization, and that was, of course, through the works of President Trump, Jared Kushner, and other Trump administration officials who had hoped to lay a foundation for a wider peace in the Middle East. And certainly there was an ambition in the second term of the Trump administration to expand the Abraham Accords, perhaps some call it Abraham 2.0, to include the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is still not signed on to those accords. And there were discussions that Riyadh could perhaps join the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel. And then October 7th happened. In fact, there are some in the region, some analysts believe that Iran, viewing the writing on the wall and the potential for Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords and to normalize relations with Israel, which would have been historic, that some believe in the region that Iran saw that as a strategic threat to its own interests and its proximity to the region. And then you saw the October 7th attack against Israel and, of course, the subsequent war that we are witnessing. Look, certainly you're going to see Arab Gulf states like Qatar, which have been hosting the negotiations between Israel and Hamas, indirect negotiations. And of course, now new reports have emerged that the U.S. has now established direct negotiations with Hamas that are taking place, according to reports in the American media, in Doha. So that gives leverage to Arabian Gulf states like Qatar. And of course, at the same time, you saw the Arab League meeting that put together an Arab plan for the reconstruction of Gaza that would be led by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and financed by other Gulf states. The White House so far has said that, well, this plan still doesn't work for the Trump administration because Gaza has been rendered uninhabitable following the clashes and the war between Hamas and Israel, and with much of the Gaza Strip completely destroyed, all of the civilian infrastructure destroyed. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's Middle East advisor, went to the Gaza Strip. He was the first American official in 20 years to go. And then when he came back to Washington, he reported to the president that he essentially saw a wasteland and there's tens of thousands of unexploded ordnance that American officials believe that would make it very difficult and very unlivable for Gazan Palestinian civilians, to go back to their homes or whatever is left of their homes. So I think there is still some leverage by Arab Gulf states. Look, let's not forget that Egypt and Jordan signed historic peace accords with Israel back in the 1970s, and those were brokered by the United States. Of course, there still has been, tensions between those Arab states that have signed a peace accord and full normalization with Israel. And the ambition by Washington has been, well, let's bring in Saudi Arabia, of course, the home of the holiest sites in Islam, and that would be a geopolitical earthquake in the region. But that won't happen until a resolution to Gaza and a wider peace resolution in Israel and the Palestinian issue is resolved. But I do think that Arab Gulf states still maintain significant leverage, but all roads lead to Washington. So the question is, what now that the Trump administration has responded to the Arab plan, what will these Arab states do next? And that is still not clear, given that the Trump administration has sent a renewed warning to Hamas that the U.S. would greenlight another Israeli offensive if all American hostages, including all Israeli hostages, are not released immediately.
Indeed, a lot depends on the ceasefire agreement to be achieved and sustained in the near future. But again, coming back to the Abraham Accords, Mr. Cohen, the Abraham Accords were hailed as a historic step towards peace, but with this new coalition supporting Gaza's reconstruction, some might argue that the region's future is being rewritten again. Do you think these efforts by Arab nations to secure Gaza's future could undermine or complement Israel's emboldened stance in the region?
Well, we should underline this very important fact. Unfortunately, Gaza has turned as a headache not only for Israel, but also for the moderate Arab nations, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and the other countries in our region. So these countries are trying to find a very creative solution to this current problem. But in my opinion, undeclared consensus is all of these countries and Israel. We believe in a future without Hamas terrorist organization, because Hamas unfortunately is creating an obstacle for a prosperous Middle East, and therefore after October 7th this entity should be eradicated. And later, when we are done with this entity, then, in my opinion, our way would be paved for prosperity and peace, and also other nations, including Saudi Arabia, will normalize their relations with the state of Israel, and then we're gonna speak about a prosperous Middle East. And hopefully also our Azerbaijani friends will also get into this equation. Israel and Azerbaijan, we have perfect relations, but the sky is the limit. We should improve our relations even more. So we would also love to see our Azerbaijani friends in this equation. Also, maybe in the future, they may facilitate as a mediator between Ankara and Jerusalem.
Indeed, that's very interesting. Actually, I had this question in my list, Ubay. Azerbaijan has long maintained very strong diplomatic ties with Israel. And given its strategic position in the South Caucasus, close ties with the border in Turkey, both actually with Israel and Turkey, how do you see Azerbaijan contributing to the expansion of the Abaraham Accords and its position in the future around the situation with Gaza?
Absolutely. Azerbaijan has a very unique role to play.
Ubay, please. Yeah. Ubay, please.
Azerbaijan has a very unique. Absolutely. Azerbaijan has a very unique role to play in the Middle East, given the strategic relations that Azerbaijan has with Israel, full diplomatic relations and long-standing strategic ties between the two countries on the defense and on economic trade ties and tourism. And Azerbaijan enjoys warm and close relations with the Arab states, as well, of course, as the strategic alliance between Turkey and Azerbaijan. So Azerbaijani diplomats have long sought to play that role of connective tissue, as it were, between these states that sometimes find themselves at odds or in indirect conflict. So Azerbaijan's unique role as a country that has positive relations on the Arab side, that strategic alliance with Turkey and that strategic partnership with Israel really could place Baku in a kingmaker role to try to bring all these countries together for regional stability.
Mr. Cohen, given Israel's security concerns and its historical reluctance to engage with Gaza directly, under what conditions do you think, and if you think so, Israel might consider participating in or facilitating the proposed $53 billion reconstruction plan?
I don't think that this is something feasible. Israel still is very much, synchronized itself with the Trump administration. Unless we're gonna receive a blessing also from the Trump administration that we're gonna adopt such a solution, I really do not expect from the Israeli government to adopt a contrary view vis-a-vis Donald Trump. I assume that we will see a very harmonious stance between the Israeli government and the U.S. government here. So, in my opinion, at this step, this is not feasible from the Israeli point of view.
Mr. Cohen, additional question to you. Just a couple of days ago, we had quite interesting program with an expert joining also from Israel and the United States. And the experts say that Israel is not so much in favor of the plan proposed by Donald Trump to see the future of Gaza as a Riviera. What's your stance on that, being there in the center of these events? How do you consider the stance of Israel on the position which Donald Trump takes now in regards to the region?
I'm very much aware of the fact that this is something very complex. It is almost like a mission impossible to take all of these people from that region. But I can also give you some examples from the history that it was, possible. For instance, 1974, Turkish Cypriot War. The Turks launched an intervention, a military intervention in the north of the island. The Cypriots who were living in the north of the island, they were transferred to the south of the island, and all of the Turks who were living in the south of the island, they were transferred to the north. Long story short, since 1974, we are not witnessing any kind of violence in Cyprus. So if this instrument of transfer is sufficient in the Turkish hands, then why wouldn't it be sufficient also in the Israeli hands as well? In this regard, Jordan, Egypt, and other Arab countries can facilitate to adopt these people. So, I think this is something possible, but of course we need partners here.
Ubay, do you expect Israel to work closely with Arab states when it comes to the future of Gaza restoration and not only?
In order to answer that question, we should make sure that Hamas terrorist organizations will be eradicated. They have to be eliminated, and they should play no role in the future of the Gaza Strip. As long as Hamas is in the equation, I don't think that we can talk about the future of Gaza or a reconstruction of Gaza. Again, I would like to highlight once again, as long as our Israeli hostages who were kidnapped from their own homes are still in the dungeons of Gaza, we cannot speak about the reconstruction of Gaza.
Ubay, what's your opinion about this? What is the position of the United States of America here? Do you expect, and what are the expectations of Washington to have Israel in a cooperation with Arab states and when it comes to the future restoration or any other things regarding to Gaza?
Yeah, well, certainly there does not seem to be any agreement between the joint Arab plan for the post-war Gaza and Israel. There doesn't seem to be any agreement on what's the so-called day-after plan for the Gaza Strip. You know, the head of the Israeli army himself said that Hamas has not been defeated despite the war. So who handles the governance? Who handles the police force in Gaza? And the Trump administration is very serious about its plan and reconstructing Gaza, turning it into a prosperous area, the Riviera on the coast, and that is President Trump's vision, saying that look, he wants Gazans to live a peaceful life, so that the cycle of war, which happens every few years in the Gaza Strip, can finally come to an end. So, but that being said, Egypt is, as well as Jordan, are very concerned on what happens to the 3 million, Palestinians living in Gaza. The Egyptians have said we cannot have the Gazans come to the Sinai Strip, and the King Abdullah of Jordan has also told President Trump that he does not support taking a large, the population of Gaza into his country. But President Trump is sticking to his plan, saying that, look, Egypt and Jordan receive over $1 billion of American economic and military aid. And, the White House wants Jordan and Egypt to work together with this plan and vision outlined by President Trump. But there doesn't seem to be an agreement on that way forward on Gaza between the Arab plan on one hand and President Trump's vision for rebuilding and reconstructing Gaza with American leadership. So there's still a major divide here. And of course, even with the Arab states that have full diplomatic relations with Israel, there does not seem to be an agreed upon way forward or blueprint on how do you rebuild Gaza and what is the governing structure of Gaza if this war does come to a sustainable end following the negotiations. So still a great deal of unknowns.
Well, dear experts, thank you so much for joining our talk today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to remind, today with us we had two distinguished guests, Eytan Cohen, who joined from Israel, and Ubay Shahbandar, our own, who joined from Washington, D.C.